Story 1. People are too insecure to communicate clearly and confidently. People put too much value in external ideas of what their relationship should look or feel like instead of relying on their own feelings and intuition. Story 2. From looking at my friends who are in relationships, ever since the dawn of time, it was and still is communication. Nobody opens up about their feelings. Everyone is traumatized from their past experiences, and everyone lies or jumps to conclusions. Everyone is just really, really bad at communicating. Story 3. Lack of communication and withholding information. But overall, I think swipe culture has ruined dating relationships. Putting the cart before the horse is a problem. This always makes me think of IKEA carts for some reason. So hard to push sometimes. Story 4. People expect a perfect, issue-free relationship, and any bit of fighting, disagreement, or other conflict is reason to end it. There will be arguments and there will be disagreements. But learn to work through it and really stop and listen to your partner. Hear their reasoning for their viewpoints. It's usually partner versus partner, not partners versus problem. Obviously, lots of fighting or constant fighting isn't a good thing. Obviously, people argue occasionally. Not sure where some are thinking there will never be any in a healthy relationship. Not saying it's fine to scream at each other. But know how to recognize what the problem is, know how to talk with your partner and how to communicate. Story 5. I don't know since I'm not currently dating. I married one of my best girlfriends a few years ago, but I think the temptation of the upgrade in every facet of society is our collective biggest issue. Nothing can ever be good enough. You're always being pushed to find perfection, which just doesn't exist. And the ability to supposedly upgrade in the dating world via dating apps and social media is always there. I would just hate to be a young high schooler right now, I'll tell you that much. Story 6. Treating people as products. Treating relationships as 2-year warranties. Confusing interest with love. An uncertain future and an unstable present that paralyze the search for a partner or family, since they do not know if they will even be able to support themselves financially, leading to an increase in casual relationships and fear of long-term relationships and settling down. Story 7. People look for a significant other that isn't at first a friend. Many relationships are formed around filling the significant other position instead of friendship and compatibility on a basic level. People who clearly would never be friends are dating because she's not my friend, she's my significant other, implying they're not a friend but something else entirely. It doesn't take long before the holes start to show. Story 8.1. Too much choice. The grass is always greener. No incentive to work out problems. Mythology of the one. Millions of people reject perfectly compatible individuals because there is one thing wrong with them and the notion that chemistry will exist forever. No incentives to stay together, many incentives to divorce. Story 9. First, it gives very unrealistic views of relationships. Most people only post their happy moments. Second, it provides many opportunities for cheaters. Third, it also gives unrealistic views of what normal people look like. Too many people enhance themselves using filters, and it makes those who are not as camera-friendly feel unattractive and like they could never compete. Story 10. As a 22-year-old who has dated several people, too many people are afraid of conflict or simply say they dislike conflict. No one likes conflict, but it is required for you to resolve issues and to grow better together. The inability for people to take constructive criticism, emphasis on constructive, is the root of a lot of relationship issues that I notice among friends and from my own experiences. Humility is a hard issue to learn for many. Story 11. Our world is focused on overstimulation. You get what you want whenever you want it. Entertainment comes at the click of a button. This attitude can potentially affect the way we view or exist within a relationship. We are conditioned to get what we want without much work or time behind it. The good thing is human connection is vastly different from internet connection, so for the most part, our relationships will be normal. It's important to be self-aware about your technology usage, though, because more often than not it will get the best of you. Story 12. Technology. 1. The internet has gotten us used to instant gratification, but meaningful relationships require a deep emotional connection that can only be built up over time. If you want a truly stable and healthy relationship, there are no shortcuts and there is no instant gratification. Technology has sped everything in life up, from travel to communication. For people who are looking for instant gratification, consciously or not, technology significantly speeds up the progression of the relationship. Because many relationships progress too fast, a lot of people have sex very early on and get infatuated with one another. But by its very definition, infatuation is an unreasonable passion. The pleasure and intense emotions associated with sex trick them into believing that they truly love one another, when in reality they've actually fallen in love with the emotional high they're experiencing. And like any form of intoxication, it eventually wears off. Because the relationship wasn't built on a solid foundation, it begins to collapse with nothing else to hold it up. Never mistake infatuation for a true emotional connection. They are not the same. Cell phones. People aren't supposed to have access to one another all the time. Humans need time to process and sort out their own thoughts. If you're in contact with one another 24/7, you never get the time you need to reflect and process. Your emotions never get to take a break, and you inevitably burn out. Communication. Our modern, interconnected society has led to most people having underdeveloped communication skills. Before this technology existed, people needed to communicate clearly and effectively. They couldn't contact others whenever they wanted to, so if they couldn't make their words count, then they lost their chance entirely. But with modern technology, we simply don't have the same constraints forcing us to develop those skills. The grass is always greener on the other side. The internet and media are always showing us supermodels and false realities, making you dissatisfied with what you have, making you want something better, but it's all a trick. True happiness comes from emotional fulfillment, and no amount of good looks or other superficial traits can provide that. At the end of the day, the grass is always greenest where you water it. Cherish what you have or else you'll lose it all. Story 13. The sunk cost fallacy. Just because you've been with someone for a decade doesn't mean you should stay in a toxic relationship. Fighting to win an argument instead of fighting for understanding so that you can learn to treat each other better. Just because you love someone doesn't mean you are compatible as partners. And lastly, lack of respect. I see so many partners who do not respect each other. Respect and trust should be the foundation of your relationship. Story 14. Many people lack strong friendships and communities. This results in people getting into relationships and relying on only one person for support, which leads to frustration and resentment. Story 15. Too many broken people looking to fix something within themselves by meeting another person, but they just end up sabotaging that relationship because of trauma that they haven't sorted out. And there's a lot of double standards, as well as people getting into relationships for the wrong reasons, whether that be for sex, money, or simply being lonely and needing new attention from a different person every couple of months. Story 16. Most people refuse to date and get into a serious relationship with friends, saying things like, "Oh, that guy or girl, not going to happen. He or she is my friend." I never understood this logic. Is it better to date strangers you know nothing about? I've been in a relationship with my best friend for 10 years. We have known each other since we were kids. And it's amazing. We are getting married next year. We already knew all the pros and cons of each other before the relationship even started. Story 17. While it is true that you should hold out for someone who is truly compatible with you, there is still no such thing as perfection. Many people I know or have dated will walk away from a genuinely great connection, where there is compatibility and many things in common, for the misguided idea that the grass is greener on the other side. I've been genuinely in love a few times in my life, and each of those relationships was perfect in the beginning. But when the honeymoon phase is over, they would rather leave the relationship than actually work on themselves. Some people don't even know what working on yourself actually means. To notice your own behaviors that need improving and to consciously address them is very hard. But I do it. I always have. I personally come from an abusive home with terrible role models for parents, and a lot of what I thought I knew about life and relationships I spent my entire 20s unlearning. I see myself as a constant work in progress. Many people are so stuck on the whole idea of finding the right person, but they do nothing to be the right person. Couple this with the belief that there's someone out there who is perfect for you, and it's easier for these people to just leave an otherwise great relationship. To be clear, this does not include genuine abuse, trauma, or cheating, in which case, yes, please leave that relationship. Those are the things you should actually leave for, not just because you got into a standard argument or your partner snores or something like that. Story 18. People are just scared to commit. They would rather have some fun, and when things go wrong, drop everything they have. They are scared to get attached. They are scared to take risks. They just overthink and do not trust their hearts. Story 19. The number of people who settle for someone they're only half interested in or attracted to, simply because they're either afraid of being alone or can't be bothered to go out and find something real, is crazy. There are many reasons the divorce rate is so high, but that's definitely a main one. I don't know if television and movies are to blame, but people seem to have this list of what they need to have accomplished by certain ages to be a proper adult. So, if they haven't found someone by their mid-20s, they usually just settle for someone who is nearby. Story 20. Nothing. Relationships have always been unstable and unfaithful. The difference is nowadays people talk about it. Exaggerating, of course, not every relationship is problematic. But many are, and people used to just ignore it and get depressed over it, whereas today we are more likely to just end it and look for some new experiences. Story 21. In my mother's opinion, we live in a throwaway society. 50 years ago, if something broke, you fixed it, including appliances, furniture, cars, and every relationship. Now, with things so readily available, including potential partners due to the internet, it's easier to throw something away and start over than to work on it to fix it. Story 22. There is nothing wrong with today's relationships that has not been wrong with relationships for ages. Selfishness, laziness, and poor communication have always existed. The only change is the way it manifests. Story 23. I came up with this when I was high. 50 years ago, if you bought a lighter, you bought one you loved. If it ran out of gas, you filled it up. If the flint wore down, you would replace it. But now we buy disposable lighters, knowing we can just use them and throw them away when it suits us. This is a general observation on society. And to be honest, I think it has an ounce of truth to it. Story 24. Seeing a lot about communication and too much choice. One thing I am not seeing is overblown expectations for what a partner should do for you. Too many people think a partner will complete you, make you whole, help you achieve your every desire, and so on. Those things are not possible. Both people in the relationship need to be able to help each other and help themselves at different times. Expecting the relationship or the person to make your life perfect is an unfair and unrealistic idea. Story 25. My thought is that everyone gives up and thinks that there is always something better. People don't know how to keep pushing forward and working things out. Story 26. Infidelity was always a thing and always will be a thing. With the information age and after no-fault divorce was implemented, people were encouraged to leave situations instead of suffering in silence. Also, online dating and social media are like shopping for people in a catalog. It's not natural and leads to unrealistic expectations. Story 27. It would probably help if you listed out grievances because, to be honest, I don't see anything better or worse with the relationships now versus in the past. Are we talking about long-term relationships, the dating process, or divorce rates? Story 28. When I was discussing it with my ex, anytime I would point out an instance where she lied or did something that hurt me, she would say I was trying to make her feel she was a bad person, even as I insisted she wasn't a bad person. In the end, she was refusing to look at screenshots of messages she had sent me because it was just part of my emotional abuse. It was so weird to see this understanding of emotional health being twisted into a tool to shut down communication and introspection. Story 29. Fear of missing out. If you have a non-toxic partner who is also a friend that you can share intimate experiences with, you win. You have to communicate where you want to be in 5 years, how you feel about and spend money, political alignment, religious affiliation, confrontation style, cleanliness, hygiene, pets, homeownership, and children. You just have to talk about all these things before you start falling for the sunk cost fallacy of relationships. Story 30. I don't think it's wrong, but people aren't willing to put up with nonsense anymore. Those marriages that lasted 50 to 60 years only lasted because someone was putting up with a lot of difficulties that they normally shouldn't have. They only put up with it because of the time they lived in. Story 31. I would say that the issues with today's relationships are just a byproduct of fixing the problems of yesterday's relationships. This question can best be answered by considering women as the main factor. Aside from aspects of social media that have already been discussed, I believe that the nature of relationships has gradually shifted to be more about connecting with the other person. The relationships of the past, especially further back, were generally less about connecting with another person and more about financial security, interpersonal stability, work partitioning, and meeting social expectations and roles, especially for women. Recent relationships are among the first where a woman has the freedom to actively choose which men to form a bond with, without risking social stigma, financial issues, or potential harm, due to the freedoms associated with social equality for women. When a person can move up in the world, become self-sufficient, and be intimately free, they have the ability to consider compatibility instead of settling for the first or most convenient partner. Much of what people argue is wrong with today's relationships, such as being non-committal, too much choice, or a moving target of what a relationship should be, are a byproduct of a positive loosening of relationship expectations. Now that many women are more financially, sexually, and socially independent, heterosexual relationships are more grounded in human connection, shared beliefs, expectations, and compatibility. In my experience, the primary reasons for marriage are highly variable and diverse, rather than being based on societal expectations. This change is beneficial because dating and marriage should be driven by love and connection, not by social, legal, or economic obligations. Couples are taking it slow, figuring out if they are compatible, considering their future, and deciding roles such as the stay-at-home parent versus the breadwinner, and whether they want children. They are generally trying for a better foundation for their partnership. This explains why it is harder for people, especially young men, to find good relationships today. Even though good relationships now last longer and are reported to be more fulfilling, everyone is essentially starting fresh and figuring out how to form relationships that are not based on social, personal, economic, or societal survival.